So this week I have The Mummy, and they should rename this movie to The Hot Mess, because I don't even know if I'd call this a reboot of the most recent Mummy franchise, as it seems to have absolutely nothing to do with it. It stars Tom Cruise, Annabelle Wallis, Sophia Boutella, Jake Johnson, and Russell Crowe, and it's introducing Universal's Dark Universe, which I feel like is their answer to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they're trying to tie all these movies together. So they've got an upcoming Frankenstein and Dracula and Invisible Man, and then this week they announced that they were adding The Phantom of the Opera and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Because when I think of classic movie monsters, clearly I think of a dude who lives in an opera house and a dude who lives in a church.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing here. But somehow they attracted all these huge names to be in these movies. Russell Crowe is Dr. Jekyll, and they've announced that Johnny Depp and Javier Bardem are both signed on to be in these movies.
Wow.
So I'm not sure exactly who's playing what yet, but those are some really big names. So clearly they're sinking a lot into this. The problem is, in The Mummy, they spent way too much time trying to set up this overly complicated world where evil and dark forces exist and these monsters are real. And I think Russell Crowe was probably the most interesting part because he plays Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I thought they should have started with his backstory instead, because he's clearly been in some established secret society and all this weird sort of stuff that they just kind of expect you to accept at face value. And then they also expect you to accept at face value all this Egyptian nonsense going on.
Yeah.
So it was really challenging, and my guess is it maybe had to do with Tom Cruise saying, I want to helm the first one.
Yep.
So politics aside, Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise in it because he's incapable of being anything else. I can't see him as anything else in any movie, right? Jack Reacher is just him as Tom Cruise.
Yep.
All the Mission Impossible films are him as Tom Cruise. Anything
Oblivion,
is him.
all of them.
Exactly. All of them are just Tom Cruise as Tom Cruise, and he's great at being Tom Cruise.
Yeah, he's got it down to a science, that's for sure.
But I'm a little tired of it.
Yeah.
So
he was a little bit funny in this, I thought.
He was a little bit funny, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, they're trying to incorporate humor. It's kind of a zombie movie. I guess mummies are zombies in a sense. Mm-hmm. It's also an action flick, but I don't think it went far enough in any of the directions. Mm-hmm. Like with the zombies in the action, for example, she's a mummy, she's back from the dead, she's cursed, and she gains these powers, and then they don't escalate at all, right? She just has the same powers through the movie. So where's the increased risk, right? She just keeps hunting him. Yeah. And it's a 2-hour cat and mouse, Tom Cruise constantly running in his Tom Cruise run movie.
Yep. I was actually going to ask you because I did see the original Mummies with Brendan Fraser back in the day, like 10, 15 years ago. Does this story have anything to do with those stories at all?
If it did, they did not give any indication of it because I hadn't seen those since they came out, and I could not piece it together. Also, I feel like it was missing The Rock as the Scorpion King, but I think he should be in everything. So.
I agree.
So this one, they do have a female mummy in it, and you might recognize Sophia Boutella from Star Trek Beyond, which I thought she was great in, but it also had me confused as to what's going to happen in the Dark Universe, because if she's the mummy, what does that make Tom Cruise? Which I don't want to go too much into the plot if you are going to decide to see this movie, but it left me with questions that I'd already seen the movie. So it's going to be very interesting where they go with this. And again, as you mentioned, like it's got some humor in it, but I'm not really sure. I felt imbalanced, right? Like random humor scenes would pop up and then we'd have to go back to chase scenes with zombies and mummies. So I didn't feel like there was an escalation of the stakes. The acting was fine. Yeah. If you like Tom Cruise, it's fine. But I was just kind of bored. So if you want to watch a 2-hour Tom Cruise chase movie, I think there are a lot better movies to see than this. So I'm only going to give it 1.7.
Whoa. Wow. After giving Wonder Woman a 5 out of 5 last week, man, The Mummy did not stand the test of time with that one for sure. I saw Wonder Woman real quick. Sorry to totally derail for a minute, but I saw Wonder Woman after you reviewed it, and I loved it.
Right. So, it's fantastic. So you know what? See Wonder Woman again instead of seeing this, because I really do think if you want action, comedy, and all that stuff in one movie, it's not going to be The Mummy. It's going to be Wonder Woman.
Okay, so no Mummy this week, according to Dana. Not a good movie, but you have a few others to review,
I do.
Right?
And speaking of women in film, so we've got 2 female-led movies. If you've already seen Wonder Woman 3 times like I have and want to see something else that stars women. So I have My Cousin Rachel, which stars Rachel Weisz as Rachel, which there's no stretch there. Sam Claflin from The Hunger Games and Me Before You as Philip, and Ian Glenn from Game of Thrones. And it's a Victorian dark romance, and I'm currently describing it as Get Out meets Crimson Peak, which if you've seen either of those movies, that means nothing to you. But basically, Sam Claflin plays a young Englishman whose cousin Rachel, which this was confusing to me, but his cousin Rachel had married his older cousin who raised him. Mm-hmm. So that makes her his cousin in that by marriage. Okay. She also is biologically, in a sense, his cousin. So gross. but Victorian times, so I guess that was acceptable.
Yeah.
But it's a little complicated in that sense. So she comes to visit because the person she'd married, who was related to all of them, had passed away. And so there's this mystery of, well, what happened to the older cousin? Did she kill him? Is she a gold digger? Is she like the OG gold digger? There was a bunch of stuff about legal things. I was like, did Kanye write this? Is this a big thing about prenups? Like, if you ain't got prenup? So before prenups really existed. Is she a murderer? What's going on here? What are her intentions? And I actually thought it did a pretty good job of building this up. The original story is written by Daphne du Maurier, who wrote Rebecca and The Birds. So she's clearly got a style. It's kind of a horror thriller type thing going, and people are clearly drawn to making her movies. And it was interesting. I hadn't seen it before. It's actually a remake and clearly an adaptation, but I thought they did a good job of bringing it into a little bit more of a modern feeling, even though it's set in Victorian England. If you want a break from some of the superhero action-packed movies this weekend, this might be an interesting choice.
I love her, too. I don't know what it is about her, but she sucks me into every role. She can play 100 different characters, and she's believable in every role that I've seen her in. Even back, remember that Liv Tyler movie she did back in the day where they were in Italy together? I don't even remember the name of it.
Oh, yeah.
Let me think. What was it called?
Yeah.
It was a Bertolucci film,
Stealing
wasn't
Beauty.
it? Yes, Stealing
Raid,
Beauty.
yeah.
I had to Google it.
She was great in that, too.
It was fantastic.
Everything she's done, I've loved her in.
And she's really great in this role because there is this side, like, is she deceptive? Is she a seductress? Is she whatever? And I thought she did a good job of kind of showcasing the subtleties of those and not going over the top of, like, this is me being evil, this is me being seductive. So it's a good showcase piece for her.
Cool.
So I'm actually going to give it 3 out of 5.
Nice. Okay. Sweet.
right.
I'll probably rent it if I'm being totally honest.
I'll probably still go see The Mummy.
That's fair.
Good for you.
That's fair.
And you have another one too, right?
Yes. So my final film this week, speaking of, Wonder Woman, this one is written, directed, and stars a woman. Her name is Zoe Lister-Jones, and you might know her from Life in Pieces, which is a sitcom on right now with Colin Hanks. It's on CBS.
Oh, yeah.
She's been in a bunch of stuff, and I think it's really cool because she was the filmmaker. She made sure that they had an all-female crew, which is so ridiculous and unheard of in Hollywood. So kudos to her for that. It's about a married couple who are dealing with some issues stemming from, unfortunately, this is maybe kind of spoilery, but I feel like it's in like all the online descriptions, but stemming from a miscarriage and also issues from just being in a long-term relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So their solution to that and dealing with their issues is to start a band. You'd think this would be cheesy, but it weirdly just kind of works. Adam Pally from the Mindy Project and Fred Armisen are in it. So Adam Pally plays her husband, and I think they had a really good dynamic on screen. They were really sweet, and you felt like, I could totally see these being a married couple who's been together for however long. And then Fred Armisen
I love him.
He's perfect in it.
Yeah.
She said that she didn't know him before she wrote the role, and it's perfect because it's a role that required someone who's a drummer, and Fred Armisen is actually a drummer.
Yep.
And then someone who can be just super kind of weird, but also not necessarily off-putting.
The thing about Fred Armisen is he's a triple threat in the sense that he was hilarious on Saturday Night Live. He's a great musician. He's on Seth Meyers' show in the band, I think. The night show with Seth Meyers. I think he's legit on the show.
Wow.
And he's freaky as you know what. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's so weird. Like, it's amazing. He could do anything.
Exactly.
He's kind of like the Robin Williams of today. What are you saying?
That's quite a stretch.
Maybe someday he will be as big as Robin Williams.
But what kind of band did they start?
It's just like an indie band in their garage, and all their songs are fights. It's like the things they fight about. So it's like I hate you for leaving your dishes in the sink, and I hate you for, and then it gets like really deep into it. So it's like if you've ever been in a relationship, you're like, that's actually verbalizing exactly how I feel about some of these things. There's one scene where she describes, or she wrote that I feel like it perfectly described the differences between men and women and how they fight. And I was like, I want all my exes to see this because this perfectly articulates how I get angry about things, and then I get angry because they don't respond to it, and then I want them to get see that I'm upset. Anyway, I loved this movie. Well, I thought it was really interesting and enjoyable.
I have an obsession with Fleetwood Mac just because Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were dating and fighting and sleeping together while dating other people, and their music was amazing because of it. So now I definitely want to see the movie.
Yeah. And she wrote all the music for the film. All the music for the film was original. They played it all live on set, which is also kind of unheard of. So I just I really thought it was enjoyable. I thought she did a really good job, and it was earnest too, which some of these movies you could feel being like too cheesy or too indie. And there's some kind of not surreal, but there are parts that push it, especially like the Fred Armisen parts with like the weirdness of it. But it's also set in LA, so I'm like, I'm sure somebody else has a weird weird neighbor like that. So it's believable. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it came out of nowhere for me, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of my favorite movies of this week. So I'm giving it 4 out of 5.
Wow. Okay, what's it called again?
Band-Aid. So it's called Band-Aid, which is, works on so many levels for this.